Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we've got some midweek stuff to talk about going into Packers week here. Sam Bradford's injury has been, updated. The timetable has been examined to some degree, so we've got something to talk about there. This gray duck goose nonsense, we're going to settle that debate here because we have a Minnesotan and then we have a non-Minnesotan. So basically it's Minnesota versus the world if you've seen the chart. So we'll see what happens with that and tie up a few other loose ends here. And then we'll talk Packers later on this week here. So let's get started here with the word from our sponsor. As always, Black Stack Brewing is a brand new brewery smack dab in the middle of Minneapolis, St. Paul, with a wide range of clean, flavorful brews and massive bright tap room, perfect for intimate settings all the way to special events. That's Black Stack Brewing, 755 North Pryor, just north of Menards, off of University Avenue. And make sure to head on down there, folks. It's actually we've been bragging about the size of the place. You've been bragging about the size of the screen. I've been bragging about their beer lately. Can't go wrong. Go check it out. Black Stack Brewing, one more time. From there, let's jump right into some Vikings hashtag content here. I think this is probably the most compelling story of the week. Minnesota believes it's gray duck, and everyone else, literally, like 100% of everyone else, believes it's goose, and they're all wrong. Your thoughts?
No, they're all right. Here's the thing that gets me is that Minnesota is literally by itself here. It's 1 versus 49 as far as like the states. There's that map flying around Twitter where 49 say goose fit, and the one Minnesota says gray duck. So I feel like at some point a realization needs to happen where you are in such a minority in this, like a nonsense argument that, okay, whatever, it's goose, fine, I give up, because you're not going to win. You're in the minority. It's 49-50. You have no point in arguing. This is clearly a debate that really shouldn't even happen. It just so happens that the Vikings of all teams celebrated this way. And now it's creating a pointless debate that is stupid because it's duck, duck, goose, but one state out of 50 likes to call it something else just to be weird because the entire state of Minnesota is weird.
Well, some might say that, you think it's a stupid discussion. I think you're stupid for having the wrong discussion. This is not a goose situation, folks. I understand that there are times possibly for bringing up duck, duck, goose instead. For example, if he was outside of Minnesota, probably would have been the correct vernacular to choose. But this happened, this was a Minnesota touchdown. I understand it occurred in Illinois.
Occurred in Chicago.
I understand that, but this is a Minnesota score. So a Minnesota celebration should reflect that Minnesota score. In my opinion,
This is an American, child's game. This isn't a Minnesota exclusively.
So is football. Football is an American child's game.
Oh, I'm saying, why does Minnesota get to choose what it's called? Why can't we, as a collective country or a collective people or a collective, massive society?
You seen the reasoning behind why Minnesotans...
The literal translation, all right? Don't do
that. We're right.
Don't do that.
If we're right, we should be able to
There's a reason things change over time. There's a reason, okay? Literal translations from how many years ago don't apply to today. This is true in any type of topic of conversation. You can go in... we're not going to get into any... political or religious debates, obviously. But there's a reason why literal translations and literal meanings from hundreds and thousands of years ago are not applicable to today.
So
Duck Goose is the dominant name because, A, it's simple. Duck, duck, goose. All right? I don't want to know about no gray. First of all, how do you spell gray? E-Y or A-Y?
A-Y.
Another debate that needs to be had for duck, duck, gray duck. It's dumb. It's pointless. Duck, duck, goose is simple. It's faster, for one thing, less syllables. All right, more efficient, and it's far enough, like it's different enough of a word that it's okay. Duck, duck, goose instead of duck, duck, gray duck, where you could have some misinterpretation, or you could listen to it wrong, and the game could be slowed up, and there could be some issues there. So, duck, duck, goose is simple. It's easier. It's more efficient. It's the better choice.
So what you're telling me, without being political, of course, is that you're racist towards people that believe it should be gray duck and not goose. That's what you're telling me, right? That's what I'm getting here. Yeah, you're a racist. You're racist.
Are not a very good listener.
That's what I'm hearing, man. That's all. That's what, like, without getting political, of course. Without trying to get political.
Where did I say anything about?
I've heard that when you're losing an argument, you're supposed to. Listen, allow me to finish my sentence. When you're losing an argument, sometimes the best thing to do is cry wolf or create something that's not actually there.
So you're the one losing the argument here.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So, it's still gray duck. Like, you're still wrong, but your your premise for arguing is, I get it. I still think you guys are wrong,
more efficient. And the translations over time are not supposed to be literal from thousands of years ago, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I understand. We're not all supposed to speak like William Shakespeare. I get that, and it'd be a bad thing if we all still spoke like
just imagine like
the writing of the Bible.
Just imagine 4-year-old kids playing like duck, duck, gray duck. So a kid that at the time, I'm saying this, but like kids at that age are very new to speaking.
Yeah.
Duck, duck, and gray duck, they sound so similar that the game can be thrown off.
Good. That's part of it. That's part of.
No, it's not.
Yes,
it
is. Being confused and being, having to critical think your way out of a situation at a young age. It's how you develop a smart brain.
This is a game for kids to play and have fun and, create relationships with each other.
This is about cerebral development here.
Oh my God. Okay.
All right. Let's you want to talk about actual Viking stuff, or do you want to do this?
This
for
is
30
technically
more
Viking stuff now. I mean,
yeah, I get that, but like it's also not.
Yeah.
You know how it's not. How that makes sense.
How it's not. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay. The next thing here, I think that we need to touch on because it's something that's going to come up. It's something that we mentioned before is probably going to continue to grow in terms of being a primary topic around Vikings territory over the next week, and that's the elephant in the room that Teddy Bridgewater can come off of the IR, injured reserve list, and take over for Sam Bradford, Case Keenum, whoever whoever the starting quarterback is at that time, assuming that Mike Zimmer and Pat Shurmur want to go that route. There are some things that obviously would happen if he were to come off of IR. There's, the contract would not toll anymore. The Vikings would be forced into a situation where they have to pay someone for sure next year. Some of the luxuries there with, overall, basically some of the luxuries of not allowing Bridgewater to play this year would be nullified immediately. But at the same time, or at least a lot of people believe this, and I think some people are. It's fair optimism, in my opinion. People believe that Teddy Bridgewater can return and keep the Vikings make the Vikings much more competitive than how.
Well, yeah,
how Case
people
Keenum
have.
Is.
There's been a loyalty to Teddy Bridgewater, a very strong loyalty to Teddy Bridgewater since he was drafted, and it's pretty clear that's kind of seeping into the evaluations of the position and when they, these people expect Teddy to come back. I think, I look at it as right now, Case Keenum's a guy. I'm slowly kind of filtering Sam Bradford out of the QB discussion right now. I just don't think he's relevant, and that sounds harsh, but the reality of his injury, it seems like, is that it's just something that's going to keep flaring up. They're even going to be more cautious now than they were after the Bears debacle. And so now it's Case Keenum for now with Slaughter as the backup until Teddy Bridgewater has received enough practice reps, by the judgment of the coaching staff to be able to play, which I would believe would be, they would wait until after the bye to be okay. We can at least have him as the actual backup to Keenum, and if they feel like he can start, that's fine. And maybe that takes a Keenum struggling performance or an injury or whatever. But I think at this point it's a pretty fair assumption to say he'll play at some point this season. We just don't know when that'll be, and I don't think it'll be for like a month at least. So
yeah, I'm in the party that believes that this Teddy Bridgewater returning to save the day miracle type narrative is real, and it's alive, and there's just no point to run from it anymore. I'm not saying that I'm not convinced that Teddy Bridgewater is going to come back and actually be better than Case Keenum immediately, simply because we saw what it looked like when Bradford came back too early and he was not ready to take a hit yet. So I'm still nervous about that first crushing blow that Bridgewater inevitably, it seems like at this point, receives. But I do subscribe to the idea that Bradford was trying to rush himself back, like you talked about the last show here. And I do subscribe to the idea that Bridgewater is going to be a very capable quarterback once again. Now, will he be starting at the point where he was kind of, end of the 2015 season with the all the potential in the world, sky's the limit type atmosphere? Or is this going to be, are we going to be able to see the cap on Teddy Bridgewater immediately? There's a huge, and that right there is a big difference. If he comes out and he's still very mobile in the pocket, accurate downfield, do all the things that we have come to love about Teddy Bridgewater and the reasons why we believe in his future, without some of good basis at times, is because of these things. So if he comes out and shows those traits, and that he's obviously going to be an upgrade to Case Keenum, I think it makes it makes a lot of sense to make the move at that point. At the same time, you could find yourself, if you're Mike Zimmer, you just take a bunch of heat for the Sam Bradford situation, rushing him back too soon. I mean, how easy would it be in this situation for Bridgewater to get put out there in week 8, week 9, or something like that, and have him basically show up and not play well at all? All of a sudden, you got people saying,
I have a situation for you, a scenario. It is we'll say it's week 7 against Baltimore. We'll go week 8. They'll be in London. Teddy is activated on the roster, and the Vikings decide to have him in uniform. And the Vikings are leading the Browns by 24 in the fourth quarter. Do you get Teddy Bridgewater in the game for game reps to get him accustomed to playing again? Accustomed to feeling pressure in the pocket, maybe getting hit once or twice? Or do you say, no, we're not going to re-injure him in something so stupid as a 30-point lead against the Browns? What would you do there? Because I feel like playing him is...
Yeah, I agree.
You think you play him?
Yeah, I think you got to shake off the rust. I mean, at some point he's got to get hit at some point, right? Like, he needs to be comfortable with the idea that he's going to get hit. So, I understand I think it's funny because I feel like people, like, just in general are going to hold their breath whenever Bridgewater has the ball in his hand from, initially until he is. Yeah, it's normal, right? I will hold my breath probably the first at least 30 to 40 Teddy Bridgewater snaps, just because you can. Well,
there's always going to be that one big hit he takes right away,
right?
Especially one that might go to a low
there
shot.
Will be a situation where someone gets pushed to the ground and kind of hits him weird low, and you're like, ooh, that's a weird angle. I hope he's all right. There's going to be that hit. That one's going to show up, and I'm concerned. But kind of going off of this point here is, I also believe in Case Keenum a lot more now than I did 5 weeks ago, 10 years ago, whatever. It's an all-time high. I think
Taylor Heineke was your guy.
For sure.
I remember when the Vikings signed Keenum.
I am okay with that. I'm okay. I'm okay with being wrong about that. This is as far as I'm concerned, this is a breakout year for Case Keenum. This is the best year of his career. He's 2-2 in 4 starts. His numbers have been efficient. If nothing else, they have certainly been efficient.
Knock on wood here, but the Vikings have not, I believe they're the only team in the league that has not thrown an interception through 5 weeks.
I know that. that sounds about right to me.
Pretty sure that's right.
I know the Vikings were right there in turnover ratio in terms of throwing the interception itself. Case Keenum's been incredibly effective. I mean, I don't think he has an interception yet this year. I think he's one of the quarterbacks that he has zero. Yeah,
Vikings team has not thrown an interception. This
year.
Right.
Yeah. It's managing the football is going to be important. Obviously, it's just going to be important against Green Bay in particular. That's. How much can you buy into that statistic, though? Like, do you look at that? Like, is that a number where you can look at it?
Well, I think a lot of it is Pat Shurmur, for one. I think he's done a lot better job than I would have expected prior to the season. I thought the Bears game was a bit iffy, but I really do think he's doing a lot better job at creating balance. When it helps, when you have an offensive line that's competent, but he's done a really good job of balancing that. And even when the running game wasn't so hot against the Bears,
right,
outside of that touchdown run, he stuck with it. And he was able to find it effective and keep the Vikings in third and short for the most part, which is obviously makes things way easier in case Keenum. So I do think Keenum and Shurmur are kind of molding together to make kind of a nice little, at least replacement team until Bridgewater or Bradford or whoever it is ready to return. I'm not sold on Keenum being the guy, or not the guy, but I'm saying if the Vikings need him for the rest of the season, hypothetically, I'm not in on that. It's just he's had a couple of games where I can't trust him yet, but there's definitely really good signs, and I think at the very least he'll give you a chance. But he's not that shootout, put up 300 yards, 3 touchdowns to outplay Aaron Rodgers type quarterback that the Vikings could have. I believe they could have anyway with Bridgewater or Bradford.
Keenum could be he might prove to be good enough to win. He's be one of those quarterbacks, like a veteran that you can win with. I think is the the term that, or the phrase that a lot of people like to use.
When he was signed, I used it all off season.
Right. Yeah. That's and I'm okay with that analysis. But I am not quite there yet in terms of projecting upside with Case Keenum. I could see the Vikings winning 9, maybe 10 games with Keenum. They would have to probably luck into a couple of them or have things bounce their way at least. And I think that the difference for me is right now is that I can see him having a 9 or 10 win ceiling, whereas with Bridgewater, I see the Vikings ceiling as higher, around maybe 11 wins, probably a little bit higher. And just, I don't know, man. I think that Bridgewater simply offers the Vikings so much more, just from a potential aspect. Just looking at what he was able to do, and just if you can get a chunk of that, the Vikings are going to be in a good situation, moving forward. At 2-2, if you come out of this week, 2-3, drop a big one to the Packers. Obviously, that's an important loss. But if you can make it to 3-3 through the first 6 weeks after very unstable quarterback play, all the peaks and valleys that we've seen throughout this season, I think that you have a chance if Bridgewater's able to return to the form that kind of. I don't want to say the expected form because I don't know what you should expect here, but kind of the form that where he's still the same player that he was before he was injured.
I mean, yeah, I think it's just going to be very important to get either Bradford or Bridgewater back after the bye week. I think that's.
I'm not confident in Bradford coming back.
Right, I'm not either. I mean, I've said last show that I don't think he will. So
yeah.
Looking at the schedule, the Vikings have Packers at home, Ravens at home, and then the London game against the Browns before the bye. 3 winnable games for sure. You got to get 2 of those, I think. You can't go in the bye with what the schedule looks like after the bye. You have to have over 500 for your record. So, assuming 5-3 at the bye, which again is not, I don't know how safe of an assumption that is, but 5-3 at the bye. Then you get 5 of your final 8 on the road, including a 3-game stretch that includes at Detroit for Thanksgiving, at Atlanta, at Carolina. That's a very difficult 3-game stretch. I don't like Case Keenum playing on the road for those games, especially against teams that we know how Detroit and their secondary is. We know Atlanta's very potent offense. And Carolina they beat New England and they beat Detroit at Ford Field. So though you got to get a quarterback like a Bradford or Bridgewater who is unflappable on the road. I think Bridgewater probably speaks to that more than Bradford does, but you got to get a guy that won't be rattled by it. And I think Bridgewater's probably the ideal candidate there, which is why I like him to come back after the bye, either at Washington or at St. Louis, or against St. Louis week 11, to kind of get him assimilated and get him ready for those 3 straight road games.
All right, here's a thinker for you. So let's say hypothetically Case Keenum is the Vikings quarterback for the rest of the season here for whatever reason. Bradford doesn't make it back. Bridgewater doesn't make it back either. Case Keenum is the guy. He wins the Super Bowl somehow. Hypothetically, he wins the Super Bowl. I don't know. I don't know how it happened, but Case Keenum leads the Vikings.
I know where you're going with this,
Bowl.
and I don't like it.
Is he? When he wins the Super Bowl, do you sign Case Keenum? Like, does he become your franchise quarterback in that situation, or do you look at it as Vikings defense must have been good enough to win the Super Bowl because otherwise Case Keenum isn't getting it done? Your Super Bowl winning quarterback, the first one in franchise history, probably do you either let him walk out the door or?
I've said before about I remember saying this last year about Bradford after the Vikings were 5-0. I said, if the Vikings win a Super Bowl with Sam Bradford, give him all of the money that he wants. And I feel like I can't stray from that just because it's Case Keenum. So I guess, and the thing is, he would not command Bradford money, I don't think, unless something drastically changes the rest of the season and he just lights it up. But that would be cool. Because at that point I wouldn't really care about the aftermath of the 2018 season. I would stop caring about that, and I would just a Super Bowl is a Super Bowl. So it's a very strong hypothetical you got there because
realistic hypothetical. I think
it is not realistic.
That's my opinion. So
okay, well, all right.
I'm entitled to.
What would you pay Case?
No.
Okay. No,
I would not. I would. I think that it's a funny thing to think about because I think it would be a very Vikings type error, right? To once you finally get your Super Bowl, just
I wouldn't even care
blindly
care. Get one.
I get that blindly pay him whatever amount of money, and have him just basically show up and do
fact
nothing
that the Vikings
for the rest of his life.
The fact that the Vikings didn't pay Bradford this offseason shows me how cautious they're being with this entire situation. I feel like Keenum, in that instance, would fall into it. I don't know, because right before the season, I was advocate of paying Bradford, which I thought was playing it safe in that situation because we didn't know about Bridgewater's knee. Bradford had, shown promise last season, and now he's got more weapons. And if he had lit it up this season, all healthy, his price tag would have gone up even higher. So I was kind of on the safe side, like, okay, let's pay him now, which is going to be rather cheap comparing to what he would probably make this offseason with a healthy season. So I was wrong on that one for sure because he's might not get the big money that he is expecting anymore. So I don't know. I feel like the Vikings are just taking this very cautious, and I don't know if they're going to get a real answer before they have to make a decision as to who is going to get the money for next year.
Yeah. There's definitely no closure yet to the Vikings quarterback discussion. I don't think that Case Keenum is technically in that discussion just yet.
Well, the hypothetical you presented, he would go into that conversation.
Right. I understand that. In the hypothetical that I created where he wins a Super Bowl this year for the Vikings, yes, he is definitely in the discussion. But generally, he's still got a ways to go before he's
sure.
Even in this, even with, one leg Sam, no idea what's going to happen with him, and hypothetically one leg Bridgewater, we don't know what he's going to look like either. Case Keenum still has work to do, but I do think it's impressive for him to come in, right away, week 2, like very early in the season, and keep the Vikings afloat at 2-2. I think that we could look back at some point if he's able to continue having success. The Vikings are able to continue to kind of rattle off victories in the face of adversity. We might look back at this being like critically important games, and look back at Case Keenum being a game changer for the Vikings this season. So regardless of how the Vikings finish up, in my opinion, I think Case Keenum's earned his money just in 4 starts as a backup quarterback. I mean, there are guys like Ryan Nassib in New York who just haven't played for like 4 years because Eli Manning never sits, and you never really get a feel for what they're able to do or feel for what their role as a backup quarterback is. Keenum has already definitively solidified himself as the team's backup quarterback, and doing a very good job executing his role. And I think that he's continuing to get closer and closer to making a case, no pun intended, for him being a future starter at some point, maybe a bridge starter for another team at some point in his career.
Browns will pick him up next year.
Exactly.
Sit behind Kaiser. Kaiser will have 2 or 3 games where he'll struggle, and the Browns will inexplicably take him out of the game and start Case Keenum after they're already 0-5 and the season's lost, because that's pretty much what they do every year. They have this promising quarterback who shows promise, but the rest of the team is bad. They lose games. They bench the guy, bring in some other guy that's clearly not. He's some journeyman quarterback who's not good. They start him. They keep losing. The franchise guy doesn't get the reps and doesn't get the development he needs. His career's over. And that's the Browns franchise in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But we're off topic.
Yeah. All right, so let's finish up this midweek show here with some defensive analysis here. We've been talking about offense for the most of the show here. I think it's good if we jump into defense for a little bit here. I got through doing the Vikings coverage chart this morning.
Yeah, let's look at that. I want to look at that because
sure. Yeah, let's do that. I wanted to talk about this a little bit because this is at least on paper, this is an extremely impressive Vikings coverage performance. I mean, anytime you only allow, I believe it's something like 100. I think it's 159 yards total, not counting yards lost from sacks. You get a strong performance. There was no single individual that allowed more than 39 yards in coverage against the Bears on Monday night. Trey Waynes allowed the most yards. He also was targeted the most at 39 yards. And then both Andrew Sendejo and Marcus Sherrills, I credited him with the 38-yard touchdown thrown by Pat O'Donnell to Cunningham.
Which, I mean, it's not really his fault, but, I mean, he missed the tackle initially, I guess, but, I mean...
It was in his coverage zone, so he's the one that gets stuck with it. It's unfair. It's, it's not a fair representation.
I mean, he did have the opportunity to stop it short of the goal line.
Yeah.
He could have made that tackle at the 15-yard line or whatever it was and didn't and missed. So I guess in that way, yeah.
Yeah. So he allows one 38-yard touchdown, and then the other touchdown being the 20-yarder-ish or whatever that Andrew Sendejo tipped up in the air, gets an unlucky bounce. Of course, he also still gets credit for one touchdown allowed. But generally speaking, this is a very good addition of the Vikings coverage chart, in my opinion. Eric Kendricks shutout on 3 targets. Xavier Rhodes, 0 targets, period. Anthony Barr with another sterling performance. I mean, overall, this is a very good performance by the Vikings defense. And I think that, while a lot of mediums have already suggested that, the defensive line was very big, and all of these different elements of, who made up who's the most impactful piece of the Vikings defense against Chicago. I don't think there's a correct answer, but I think there are multiple studs from the secondary. Harrison Smith, obviously, just a ridiculous target stat line for him. 4 targets, 1 reception allowed. It was for -3 yards and obviously an interception. So a lot of playmakers, and it's showing up in the stat sheet for the Vikings this week.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Harrison Smith was received the second most targets on the team in his area or assignment, and he allowed less yards than all the bench guys.
Yep.
And the guys that didn't play. -3 yards, and he had a pick. So that, I mean, And Harrison Smith, we already know how phenomenal he is in every aspect of the safety position. But it just goes to show how elite he is. And regardless of what you want to say about the competition and everything, you have to give some credit to a guy that puts up that kind of numbers. And I guess I would say he kind of baited Trubisky into that interception at the end. But that was another fantastic play and a clutch moment. Trey Waynes is going to kind of be the balance, I think, the rest of the year, at least for this Packers game, where Aaron Rodgers will find Trey Waynes on the field and target him exclusively almost. It's going to seem that way. The Bears kind of did that where they would roll Trubisky right. It kind of fell into their hands where Trubisky rolling right is where he's comfortable. Waynes is on the left side of the defense most of the time. So that kind of worked out that way, and Waynes was targeted 7 times. I think Waynes will be targeted double-digit times against the Packers, and Rhodes might get 3 or 4, depending on who he's lined up against. So it's going to be a big day for Waynes, obviously. If he can allow something like this where, 57% completion, 4 of 7, and then, something like 10 yards or less per catch, right. That would be a really good performance for a cornerback number 2. That's what he did against the Bears. Obviously, it's going to be probably Adams or Nelson he'll be lined up against. That'll be a different challenge, but right. For sure, it's going to be a big game for Trey Waynes. And it was last year. For 58 minutes, they went after Waynes over and over and over. He had penalties. He gave up long plays, but he made the play when it mattered at the end. So if he can kind of redeem himself, but when I mean that, I mean over the first 58 minutes of last year's game at home, if he can kind of redeem himself there, the Vikings should have a very good chance.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something we'll obviously get more into later on this week. But I think that Waynes is probably coming off one of his better 2-game stretches of his career. Obviously, like you said, allowing roughly 55 to 57% completion, 7 targets, 4 receptions allowed, and only 39 yards, no touchdowns, obviously no turnovers either, but that's just an overall very solid performance for Waynes. He is the only Viking to have allowed over 300 passing yards now, and a total of I believe it's 371 counting the penalties as well. So his season is still in coverage, but this is definitely an encouraging performance for him. One other detail here that I think that is important, and it's not completely new, but I did think it was interesting. We added a new player to the coverage chart. I typically only have done linebackers, safeties, and cornerbacks, but Danielle Hunter was dropped into coverage, I think, twice. And he was actually targeted one time and did not allow a reception. So he's now he's a new addition to the Vikings coverage chart, dropping back in coverage as a linebacker, technically, stand-up linebacker, and he looked pretty good. I also saw him moving sideline to sideline really well. You have to wonder what type of versatility Danielle Hunter has, because think about him trying to chase down, I think it was Jordan Howard. No, it was Trubisky. He was chasing down Trubisky at a poor angle, and Hunter was still fast enough to get to him before he hit the first down marker. So Hunter very impressive, and it shows up on the coverage chart as well somehow. Right.
I'm looking at this, and I see Anthony Barr's line here. 17 catches on 20 targets, which that in theory looks bad. But for 84 yards.
Yeah.
He's allowing 4 yards per catch, which in most situations is a good thing. When quarterbacks see a running back in the flat or whatever it is, they typically throw there with the expectation that running back will either make a guy miss or find some way to get 5, 6, 7, 8 yards out of the play. Barr has been really good at keeping that contained. That's 4 yards per reception allowed. Or per target in your area and your assignment is very, very good. So his performance this year has been much better. I think his instincts, or at least his attacking, at least both against the run and against the pass, and kind of reacting quickly and just not really hesitating, but just kind of going at the play. It seems like he's a lot better there. So Anthony Barr's playing a lot better. Eric Kendricks is being himself, a few missed tackles here and there, but overall very, very good. Mackenzie Alexander has been surprisingly, not bad, I guess is what I would say. And then obviously Xavier Rhodes has been elite. So this coverage team it's been pretty good, but again, toughest test of the year coming up.
Absolutely. So I guess the primary takeaway here for those of you that are interested in Xavier Rhodes, he through 5 games is currently averaging roughly 5 targets and roughly 2.5 receptions per game right now for Xavier Rhodes. So he's actually allowing an under 50% completion, 133 total yards, no touchdowns against him just yet. Terrence Newman is the only Viking to allow more than 1 touchdown thus far this season. Just overall a very impressive, Harrison Smith has allowed only 6 receptions compared to the 2 receptions that he has. So basically he's operating at a 3-to-1 reception to interception ratio, which is impressive as well. And also he's only allowing 50% completion. So combined with the extremely efficient tackling that we've gotten this year from guys like, guys who are allowing receptions like Anthony Barr, but also making the tackle the second they allow that, the second they catch the football, we'll take 4-yard receptions all day long. I don't care if you catch it, if it's only for 3-4 yards, something like that. Obviously, situation is important here. You need context. I don't want a 4-yard reception on 3rd and 3 at the 3-yard line, but generally speaking, what the Vikings are doing is going to get it done defensively. There should be a reason to believe that this is sustainable too, because none of these numbers are out of character by any means. You're seeing a fluctuation between each player having sort of a midpoint of where to expect their play to be at, and sort of kind of revolving around in the atmosphere around that midpoint. You see Rhodes kind of probably in the peak of his NFL career at this point right now. Harrison Smith might be right there with him, but everyone else is right around a very good bar for overall level of play relative to their role in the Vikings defense.
Yep. That's this is kind of what we kind of expect as far as what these guys are allowing. These numbers, none of them are surprising. Harrison Smith, just 51 yards in the season on 12 targets, and with 2 interceptions. This is kind of what we expect. The Tremaine Brock thing is obviously concerning, but what do you do? He's trying to assimilate to a new team. He's playing special teams for no reason at all, I don't think. Moving forward, this coverage chart, if you'd have shown me this, 5 weeks ago before the season, I would have looked. The first takeaway I would have had was Anthony Barr, just that so little yards per target, and then obviously I think Trey Waynes is still a bit concerning, but it's the last couple of games have been much better, and obviously his tackling and his support in the run game is phenomenal too. So it's definitely a top 5 coverage team or secondary in the NFL, and they continue to prove it week by week.
I would say that Chicago is a great example of what the potential for the Vikings secondary is, relative to probably this season and just in general.
And we have to keep in mind too the opponent.
I understand.
It's fair, but
yeah. I'm saying that's probably the peak though. Like that's the level of play that at its best, that's what the Vikings defense looks like. They can create turnovers. They can sack the quarterback. They're very efficient tacklers. They're very efficient in coverage. Windows close early, and basically don't mess with Xavier Rhodes or Harrison Smith. And if you do, good luck. So, yeah, overall, I would say encouraging performance upon review for the Vikings against the Bears. Anytime you win by only 3 points against a team that might only win 4 or 5 games this year, I understand the lack of optimism heading into, a matchup with the Green Bay Packers, who just absolutely flooded the Bears, a week ago. So I understand that, and we'll break that more. We'll get into that go into more depth with that later on this week here. But in general, I would say upon review, this has been a very encouraging performance for the Vikings, and something that projects, good things in their future as well.
We have to keep in mind they scored on a fake punt, and they also scored on a botched interception, essentially, by Sendejo that should not have been a touchdown, and that Mitch Trubisky made a stupid decision to throw the football. I would say both scores were fluky. So this Vikings defense, while the opponent wasn't great, 17 points is definitely super inflated, and I think realistically, this Bears offense deserves probably 6 points, something along those lines, 6 or 9 points. It was a shutdown performance. It was, and it shouldn't have been as close as it was. But the Vikings are able to win because that's what good teams do.
Absolutely. So I think that's about it for the About the Labor podcast midweek edition here. We will be back, as I said before, later on this week with a full, thorough preview of the Green Bay Packers and what the Vikings are up against at U.S. Bank Stadium this coming Sunday. As far as content goes for the rest of the week, make sure to check out the About the Labor pregame show later on. That'll be on Sunday at roughly 11 in the morning, an hour before kickoff. That's kind of the game plan moving forward. So make sure you're there for that. Should be a lot of fun for the second week in a row here. And then, of course, make sure to check us out at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever your heart desires. Then, if you're not already, make sure to subscribe on YouTube to Vikings Territory for not just the About the Labor podcast, but everything else that the VT team does as well. So, thanks, folks, and we will catch you later on this week.